Growth live office hours. Mike and Dylan here with the Simple Growth team, where we go on live once or twice a week and answer your questions regarding your software questions and business questions to help you along your way to seven figures and well beyond. Dylan, welcome back to the show here, and just about going on. And it's probably just like last week, where there we go. You were front and center, so we're good now, video wise.
Awesome. Yeah, we got a couple returning questions from last week that we didn't quite answer properly, I guess. We needed a little bit more clarification. And then we got a new question from Orban this week about scheduling. So I kind of have some initial answers sort of fleshed out here, but I'm curious to definitely hear your opinion on them and how you would tackle them in Service Autopilot.
All right. And since I haven't seen the questions yet, this should be interesting. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, well, let's go back to the one from last week just to make sure that we don't forget it. So I'll share my screen here. Chrome tab, Report Center.
Got it. There we go.
And I'm going to. So this one's from Steve Delaney from last week. So
and hold on one second. I'm going to hop off here a second, hop back on so I can get that. I think from last week we figured out how to actually get that on top.
Yeah, no worries. We'll see if we can get that a bit bigger. If not, we can just kind of.
All right, hold on. I'm gonna pull you off, and we will. What could go wrong? Here we go. I think we are good here. All right, perfect. We got it big enough.
Okay.
By week 3, we'll have this down pat.
yeah, I'm sure. Week 300. So. Yeah, the issue, if you remember from last week, Steve wanted to know what I thought was basically who was still active in his company, how many clients were still active in his company, and how long they had actually been with the company. But I guess either I misread it or Steve added some additional information. I guess he was actually looking for the client lifetime value, which I don't know how I messed that up, but. So, Mike, I don't know if you did this at your company or with any of our clients at all, but I was just kind of spitballing a little bit before this. I don't think we have like a pre-canned report for that or anything.
We do not.
But kind of what I know a lot of the actual service details, like when we're doing our KPI reports and stuff like that, this is typically one of the main analysis that we start with. So I pulled in the job cost detail here. I pulled in, obviously we need some client information. So I did client name, client since, and then cancellation reason. And then this was just like the next thing the only next level of information that it allowed me to pull up. So I don't know if we necessarily need that per se, but it's tricky sometimes with these reports because you kind of go down this rabbit hole of what does Service Autopilot or Logi kind of let me pull into the reports. And with this kind of string that I've created, it doesn't let me pull in like cancellation date or anything like that. So this might honestly not be the optimal way to do it, but I think this will actually work. So down here, I have it set, and this is just our demo account to kind of mess around with. But I have these columns here, client name, actual revenue, and this would be for each individual service with the date, cancellation reason, and then client since. So, Mike, I'm curious your opinion, but I would think if they have a cancellation reason, they would be a canceled client, and we can filter those people out, right?
Correct. Yeah. So I think that had a pretty interesting conversation with Jonathan Potoshnik, the founder of SA, or co-founder with John Caldwell. And one thing that Jonathan and I did a lot in the early days is we did a lot of these regional events or spoke at conferences or did Facebook Lives where we answered questions. And Jonathan and I were pretty much on the same exact page. If we hadn't serviced someone in probably 12 to 13 months, that would be considered basically a dead client. So there's a couple different ways of tackling it. Ideally, I would look at it, yes, cancellation reason, first place I'm looking, for sure. Reason, and if you're going in, we should be tracking the cancellation reason on all our clients. Now, if that's not the case, we may be able to build some logic in a case statement in saying, has this, if it is a reoccurring service, we could take a look at it based on reoccurring. But if the service hadn't happened in over 13 months of the case statement, we could filter it out. That would obviously take some formulas being built in.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that I would probably look at though is really going in and getting those cancellation reasons, because that's going to be the cleanest, easiest way of doing it, the way you've done. The other thing that's interesting is you got actual revenue total there and the service name. So if you scroll back down, Dylan, there was some other things here. It looks like you probably have done that didn't touch on yet. But it looks like you went into the client and actually grouped them. Is that correct? And Dylan may have froze here, so we'll see in a minute. But as we're waiting for Dylan to kind of glitch back in here, a couple of the things that it looks like he probably did was under the test client on the far left there, under client name, he went into aggregate group. And that is probably, I'm guessing. So actually, did you just unaggregate?
I did. You can't hear me, can you?
I can hear you now.
Oh, okay.
So,
There we go.
like a bad Verizon commercial over here. But yeah, so you did a couple things here, obviously. So the first thing, as you build in that data table, you would want to go in your client name and actually group the clients.
Exactly. Yep. So that was the first thing I did. I actually forgot that I did that. The other thing that I did is like, it will make the report many pages if you have a lot of data. So I don't know, this is just more so a personal preference, but under the data table right here, if you go into settings and then paging, you can select to show all rows, rather than have, sometimes up to like 80 pages of data.
Yeah, completely agree. The bigger companies we work with KPI reports, that's definitely the way you want to go. And then if we now on that, do you have the ability to do service date?
Yeah, I believe we do. Let me just, I think it's right here.
So that might be another one that I would look at too, because then we've got client since, service date. And if we were so inclined, we could probably go in and sort it from oldest to newest, or newest to oldest. And we can actually build some formulas in there. But I think down and dirty, if you're looking just to answer the questions today, the way I would tackle Dylan is probably just the way you tackle it identically. I would go in and make sure everything has a cancellation reason, and then be able to put in the termination or cancel date, and then run some math off that.
Yeah, and that's like kind of what I was trying to say earlier is this is just my first stab at it. There might be a different kind of pathway starting with a different item here that would actually let you pull in the actual cancellation date.
Yeah, and it may not, because I think on job costing detail as well, it does that, and then the over one on leads and clients, it does not. So I think this is probably the closest you can get to it. So I would probably drive it off the cancellation reason, and then filter what you're about to do.
I hope it's helpful that people can just kind of hear our like thought process too, because a lot of this stuff in Service Autopilot, it's like there's so many different combination of things that you can do that it's like you kind of just need to sometimes take a second, think about it, and a little bit of trial and error, and you'll usually get there. So let's filter the cancellation reason, and we would go not equal to, I suppose. And I think there's only one cancellation reason. So
yeah, in the test count, there's probably not a lot, but yeah, you put your cancellation reasons in there.
Yeah, you might have a bunch of them, but then if we add this filter, then it should kind of filter out one of the clients anyways. So then in theory, we'd be left with every client who does not have a cancellation reason, which should be active. Now, whether or not you're keeping your database nice and clean by canceling the clients that don't have any active service with you, that's maybe a topic for another day, but let's just assume the remaining clients are the active clients. From here, Steve, basically, like this still isn't very useful. You'd really have to start doing some totals for some of these items. So under this revenue column, that's the first one that I would definitely want to basically aggregate and then do a summation. And that should give us the total revenue. I don't have a date filter applied here, so it's not only pulling in like this year, for example. This should be pulling in, once again, this is our test account, but for test client number one, their total revenue, their total value, essentially to the company is 6,280. Now, if you want average lifetime value of your current active clients, then you would need to do an average, of course, as I'm sure you probably know. So let's see kind of how that looks here. And so, once again, test account, your average might be $4,000 or something like that, right? Definitely depends on what field you're in. But in this example, our average kind of client value is 191.14. Now, if you have like your costs and things like that in the system, you could drive this down to like a net profit amount and then average it from there. That might be a little bit better because maybe some of these services are a high dollar amount in revenue, but they're a low margin service. So you kind of need to factor that in as well. But this is basically what I'd be looking at. And if this report is probably very lengthy for some people that are doing this, I believe you can actually remove the detail in some of these. Forget which one it is. I think it's this one right here. So you can hit exclude detail rows. And I believe that will get rid of basically every single line item in here. So if you wanted to, if you got thousands of clients, you might not be going in and looking at each single line item and say, oh, that fertilizer service was $60. Like that probably isn't the meat and potatoes of this report. You probably just want to have this load fairly quickly and be able to pop in here and maybe say, well, which clients are lifetime value under $500? And we got to figure out why and maybe target those customers and maybe do some upsells or something like that and try to get that value up. Um, so just a thought, I know some clients that I've come across do have that where they do like a single aeration for the client each year. And it's like, that might be a good candidate to reach out to and try to upsell into, overseeding or growth control or something like that. So I'm hoping with this version 2, Steve, that's a little closer to what you're looking for. It's definitely not the prettiest report in the world, but hopefully this average here would get you to very close to what you're looking for. Like I said, if you did want to do it based off of net profit instead of basically gross revenue, that might be a little bit more useful to you. But this would just be showing you if you just wanted to do it based off of revenue. So hope that helps. Any?
Yeah, I was just playing on the other side here. I think the only other thing that you may want to put in there, we don't have to do it on the screen here, but is client source. So you may be able to see the client lifetime value based on each marketing source. So those are the things we'd want to dial in there. So I'm just looking at my other screen here.
Yeah.
Other things you could potentially run into if you build some formulas in there. We won't dive into that today, but we do have the ability of invoice date and invoice amount. So we could potentially do some logic if they haven't been billed within X amount for a reoccurring service or X amount of time for one-time service, then that would basically filter them out as a canceled client.
Yeah. And yeah, that is definitely one thing that I do recommend you do, whether you do it how Mike said, or you just look at your client list, CRM client list, and select active service, I think it is, and then there's a couple different like date filters that you can do there. But yeah, if you don't have a client that received service in the last year, I think it's definitely safe to mark them as lost. And you could just put a cancellation reason as a one-time client, right? I mean, they were a client, they're no longer a client. It's not really a bad cancellation, it's a natural cancellation, but you definitely don't want to have like 10,000 clients in your system when in reality you have 500.
Yeah, and that's a good stat too. So if that's the case, you're probably not using an automated upsell to actually go in and reactivate them. So when we put those out for clients, 60 to 80 estimate requests in the first 24 to 48 hours is not uncommon. So those you've got some data points in there, so you could really focus in and have some standardized marketing copy to activate those people that have left too. So we have a cancel, basically reactivation nurture that happens there too sometimes. So those are things you want to look at if you're building your own automations to segment that database. Good work on that one, Dylan. What do you got next for me?
So the next one is from Orban, and he was asking, paraphrasing here, but I guess he has grown his fertilizer division, it seems like, and he used to just have one technician, and he's curious what is like the actual steps that I need to do to break that route that was previously one person into two routes, essentially, where two sales reps or fertilizer technicians are actually going to be performing two separate routes.
Okay, makes sense.
So in my opinion, there's a couple different ways to tackle that, but I'm curious your opinion, obviously, as well, Mike. But how I would think about it, just logically, is I would probably go to the CRM client list and sort for every single client who has a fertilizer package with me right now. If he hasn't done this already, and maybe this is just like because I did this in the past, but I always thought about my service area in zones. And I don't know how I would necessarily survive without that. So I kind of just started a little bit of a Google sheet here. I'll share this sheet and I'll zoom in a bit. But I feel like a lot of people, and we'll get back to the fertilizer example here in a second, but I feel like a lot of people they do know this method when it comes to lawn mowing. Like most people, because there's 5 days in a week, Monday through Friday, they think, okay, it makes sense to break my service area into 5 zones. And it doesn't need to be one zip code per zone. You might have 25 zip codes per zone. The number of zip codes per zone is essentially irrelevant, but you kind of want to break it up into zones. Is that what you did at Callahan's?
Yeah, we did. I was actually just seeing if I can pull up a screenshot of it. Are you going to pull up a map? Or I like this because we want to blueprint it before we implement the change.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we can definitely go to the map next. But I was just thinking, and I've had this conversation with a couple of people while we do deep dives and stuff like that, where their fertilizer division is expanding, and the mowing is fairly simple in Service Autopilot. The fertilizer is a little bit more abstract. It's a little bit harder to plan because it's less frequent. You're doing it maybe once a quarter, once a month at the most. So kind of how I like to think about it is you still want to have your zones for fertilizer, but it does work a little bit differently because you're going, 5 or 7 times a year instead of once a week. So for fertilizer, Mike, did you still have 5 or 10 zones, however you ran it?
Yeah, we did. Let me see if I can actually share my screen here. I just pulled this up. So full transparency, I was completely unprepared for this call. Doing some homework for some other stuff, but let me see if I can pull this up here and show it in the screen. And
I'll get the CRM client list up while you're doing that. Oh, there you go. Perfect.
All right. Side note, if you're running this yourself, Dylan, when you're off screen, people cannot hear you talk. So what we've got here is the old map here for Callahan. So what you've got is basically we had 3 or 4 different zones. So obviously we kind of started the business shop was right about here. But basically this area here was like zone 1. And then there was a major highway that kind of went through her road. This was kind of zone 2, 3. And as we came down, this was basically 4. We ended up getting rid of this stuff up here past this 104 because of route density. And then this was the other zone here. So we had another one here that covered this area and this area here. Some of these guys were big commercials that were like hanging out way out of nowhere. Just like the one that's hanging out down here. There's some very large, big commercials that were full day jobs. But the majority of this was all residential. So we broke those in zone 1, zone 2, 3, 4, 5, and then these basically just bigger commercials. So that's how we kind of tackled that. The main thing that we looked at too is we broke it up. A lot of people have probably seen this here, but this would be for a mowing crew. But if we went in and made this for a FERT crew, obviously it's a 1-person technician unless it's a large commercial property where you got multiple ride-ons going. But if you had one individual on there and you were doing 410s, we would go back to an average wage of that division. So if we had certain techs or crew leaders, you'd have an average wage of say 32.25. With overtime, it'd be 33.86. So you'd go in and actually plug that in right here. And the labor burden is that number that we came up with fictitiously in this example for FICA, workman's comp, workers' comp, and let's see, FICA, unemployment, workman's comp, liability insurance, and some other things as far as holiday pay, vacation pay. And they come out as a percentage of the dollar. So we're going to add that in as well to the crew breakout. Where I'm going with this, Dylan, so a lot of times, and then we have a overhead recovery if we're using a MORE system to cover a fixed G&A cost. That's about 25% here. So let's say on an industry average, we want to make, say, 45, 50% net profit on fertilization. Let's say it's 45%, so 1.45. Our daily labor cost just for that technician with a 45% net margin is $730. We've got a truck. We probably don't have a trailer, so we would zero that out. And our hourly rate then is going to be coming in for the truck at $758, 10 hours a day, because we're going to capture the curb time as well, not just the utilization time. Got our overhead recovery and our profit now built in at 45%. So why I'm doing this is the thing that Orban's asking about, and a lot of people that ask about this, is when we schedule fertilization or any service, we don't have a dollar amount that we need to be producing. So in Callahan's, it was about $1,200 to $1,300 a day. Each technician had to produce to hit our numbers. So without kind of giving it all away right here, as I'm walking down, what we're going to see as we finish filling this out is we're actually going to see what fictitiously this crew would have to bill out. So if Orban's going out, he's going to have a fixed number he needs to bill out to hit his projected profit margin and his overhead recovery. So this would be not our truck, but this would just be our truck. There's no mowers, but let's just say our hourly rate for our ride-on spreader is $975, and we're going to be using that probably 7 of the 10 hours. So that's just the time it's being used.
Mm-hmm.
And our equipment cost for the spreader, maybe the ride-on spreader and the push spreader that's possibly on there, or the hose and reel attachment, is $98 a day. And then we really don't have a maintenance package. If we're doing maintenance, it's going to be our stick edgers, weed whackers, blowers, things like that. Maybe you do have a backpack sprayer and some different canisters and things like that. If you're doing perimeter pests, that's where this would come in. But you would actually add in how many hours a day are you using that maintenance package, or what's the hourly rate, how many hours is being used, the overhead recovery, and the overhead recovery. So let's assume maybe Orban's doing lawn care and he's created a perimeter pest division. So he's doing that at the same time as he's doing the fertilization to probably double or triple that ticket. Or if you're doing mosquito control. So that's where we would bundle this additional equipment up. So obviously this is fictitious, but the daily sales goal here before product is $1,000. It would be costing Orban or somebody $715 before profit, 10 hours a day, and his break even would be $71.49. So that's what it's costing per hour before he makes a profit. So he needs to have an hourly bill rate of about $101. So this right here, my guess with product is going to put, if this was his numbers, would put him probably around $1,300 to $1,400 a day in product. With product.
So would you break out the areas first and then use that 1,300 a day as a kind of a benchmark or a guideline to make sure that the routes are at least feasible?
So you absolutely nailed it. So just like your Google Sheet, we broke out the zip codes or zones, the zip codes that are in that zone, and then optimized it here. But obviously, we need to build more route density down here. Can we realistically, in a 10-hour day, capture all of these homes in this area?
Yeah.
And what's it going to generate? So really, especially if you're using a waiting list job, we want to take that waiting list job and be able to delegate it. We don't want it to rely on the business owner. So non-emotionally, let's say with product in there, it's a $1,300 day. That's literally a sticky note. Like it's going to be right here. We're going to stick the sticky note up on the corner. Christine in my office did the same exact thing, but she knew when she did the waiting list and put that together per zone that that's how it lined up. Now, the other thing to take a look at too that I would recommend is when we're doing those waiting list jobs, we're grabbing, say, this route here, one day and then this route here the next day. Or if he has 2 crews, potentially have group number 1 start from the farthest place in, and then the crew number 2 start from the farthest place out and work its way in, so the crews actually meet each other. Reason being, if there's a breakdown equipment wise, they can help each other, or if there is a rain delay or any issues, if you're tackling this whole side of town in one day and you only get half the day done on both technicians, and there's like a washout with rain, you only have to send back 1 truck and you can reoptimize it. And then that other crew can start working on the next day's work. So those are the things we looked at when we routed, especially with snow removal as well, and the mowing, because that eliminated the drive time from out here all the way back. And that was probably an hour and 25 minutes round trip if you took 2 sides of traffic sometimes.
And a thing I've ran into with a different company was they knew how long a round was taking them, each round. So I used that number to kind of back into like a similar system to like the day of the week and the zip code. But instead, like the company that I worked with previously, I don't know, Orban, how much fertilizing you do currently, but let's just pretend he has like 1 round currently takes him 5 weeks. I mean, that would be pretty perfect to kind of use almost the exact same system as the mowing, but instead of, in this fictitious example, 902 zip code 90210 being on Mondays, zip code 90210 could be potentially the first week of every round.
Yep. Yeah, and we keep consistency, so that's going to give that the CSR that's routing that some consistency too.
And why I like using the CRM client list, like you're on right here, is let's say Orban, you determine, like Mike said, the north west area is going to be zone 1, let's say. Well, you can bulk select those jobs and then bulk apply a tag from here. So I see some people trying to do it from the dispatch board or the waiting list, which can be helpful, but I don't believe you can bulk apply tags from the dispatch board or waiting list yet. Hopefully that'll come in the future. So this is the way to do it. So you can tag them, and then from there you can find these customers and make sure that they are getting routed on the appropriate days. If you're pulling from the waiting list, you would pull everybody with the zone 1 tag and make sure that those are getting scheduled on week 1 of the round and week 1 of round 2.
Awesome advice. Love it. Hopefully that answers the question, Orban, there. I'm assuming that's probably all we have, but is there anything else that we have lined up here?
I think that's it for today. Those were the 2 big ones. I'll make sure to reach out to those people, and hopefully we did answer those correctly. If they need any clarification, we can hit those first next week. And yeah, any future questions, just comment them on this video and we'll make sure to get them next week.
Yeah, Dylan, and after the video is up here, can you put a link to your Calendly link? Because I know a lot of people after the call yesterday wanted to basically have us go in and do, for lack of a better term, an analysis of their system, of where it was set up. Was it set up to scale for workflow? They were having some issues. So I think it's like a 15 or 20-minute call that you were doing, but basically no charge. You went in and actually gave some people some insight of these are the areas I'd work on setting the system up. A couple of people I know did it themselves, and then a couple of people actually ended up, one purchased a deep dive on the last 7 days here, just because they saw some things that they just didn't have the time to tackle it. So if you're looking for a free resource to just do that, Dylan's going to pop that in the chat right after this or during the call. And somebody on our team who's done this will definitely show you how to do that. And then it looks like you want to share your screen, so I will.
Yeah, if I could just kind of show.
And hold on one second. I'm going to pull this. I'm going to pull us both off again so we can actually see it. But as we do it, we will not be able to hear each other. All right, your time to talk. I'm going to take myself off here.
Okay. Well, yeah, this is just like a glimpse at our audit that we do. I'm sure you maybe have seen this before, but basically, yeah, depending on your size of business, we kind of walk through all aspects of your CRM. And some people, honestly, like they got everything in there. It's just a kind of pat on the back, but others are missing some things that they just weren't even aware about. So at a bare minimum, you can kind of walk away. And this is just like fictitious results here, but you can kind of walk away with an actual score of how your business is doing as it relates to kind of Service Autopilot as a CRM. So
love it. Yeah, so make sure you check that out. Dylan and the team is available to do those analysis. There is no charge for them. You walk away with an actionable report like that, and that's your blueprint. If it's something we can help you with, obviously we can get you some pricing on it. But really, some stuff on there that we technically don't even help with, but we can get you resources of people that could help you as well. So, Dylan, appreciate you joining us. I know we're still trying to iron out between your schedule and mine, set days and times this moving forward, but we'll get at least one of these live next week as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Sounds good.
Sweet.
Hope everybody has a good weekend.
Yeah. So till next weekend, drop your comments, questions below, and we'll be tackling again next week.